Appendix C. The Plural Wives of Joseph Smith. In 1887, the Utah church historian Andrew Jensen, drawing upon the enormous file of secret manuscript material in the church library in Salt Lake City, compiled a list of 27 wives of Joseph Smith. I have added to this list another 21, and have collected much additional material about Jensen's 27. The genealogical archives in Salt Lake City and the files of the Utah Genealogical and Historical Magazine were consulted to make the demographic data as accurate as possible. One source of information for wives, other than those listed by Jensen, was the Nauvoo Temple record for 1846. This lists 30 women who were sealed to the prophet. Since it is clear from other sources that 22 of the 30 women had been married to the prophet during his lifetime, it can be assumed that the remaining 8 had also been. These proxy sealings, as they were called, were simply a repetition or solemnization of an earlier ceremony. It was felt that only within the temple could marriages for eternity truly be. The Nauvoo Temple record list does not represent all of Joseph's wives, since several, like Nancy Miranda Hyde and Patty Bartlett Sessions, waited until the building of a temple in Utah before having their marriages to the prophet again solemnized. Others apparently never went through a second ceremony. In later years in Utah, scores of women were sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity, who had had no association whatsoever with him during his lifetime. No attempt has been made to include them here. This list is probably not complete and includes several whose relationship to Joseph is admittedly little more than presumptive. The thorough documentation provided below is necessitated by the stand of the reorganized church, which has always held the evidence that Joseph Smith ever practiced or sanctioned polygamy to be inconclusive. The first 36 wives are arranged in the approximate chronological order of their marriages to the prophet, and the remainder are listed alphabetically. Point 1. This was the first woman, other than Emma Hale, whose name was linked with Joseph Smith. The most detailed account of her is in an unpublished letter written to George S. Gibbs in 1903 by Benjamin M. Johnson, patriarch in the Utah Church, and brother of 2 of Joseph's wives. Johnson was then 85. It says in part, "In 1835, at Kirtland, I learned from my sister's husband, Lyman R. Sherman, who was close to the prophet, and received it from him, that the ancient order of plural marriage was again to be. This, at the time, did not impress my mind deeply, although there lived then with his family the prophet's a neighbor's daughter, Fanny Alger, a very nice and comely young woman about my own age." Johnson was then 17. "Toward whom not only myself, but everyone seemed partial, for the amiability of her character. And it was whispered, even then, that Joseph loved her. And there was some trouble with Oliver Cowdery, and whisper said it was relating to a girl then living in the prophet's family. And I was afterwards told by Warren Parrish that he himself and Oliver Cowdery did know that Joseph had Fanny Alger as wife, for they were spied upon and found together. Soon after the prophet's flight in the winter of 1837 and 1838, the Alger family left for the West, and, stopping in Indiana for a time, Fanny soon moved to one of the cities there, and, although she never left the state, she did not turn from the church nor from her friendship for the prophet while she lived. Without doubt in my mind, Fanny Alger was, at Kirtland, the prophet's first plural wife. Fanny Alger, when asked by her brother and others even after the prophet's death regarding her relations to him, replied, "That is all a matter of my own, and I have nothing to communicate." Her brother John, who resided and died in southern Utah to my knowledge, was by President Kimball in the temple at St. George introduced as the brother of the prophet Joseph's first plural wife. A letter from Oliver Cowdery to his brother Warren A. Cowdery, dated Far West, Missouri, the 21st of January, 1838, neatly corroborates the Johnson letter. When he, Joseph Smith, was there, we had some conversation in which in every instance I did not fail to affirm that what I had said was strictly true. A dirty, nasty, filthy affair of his and Fanny Alger's was talked over, in which I strictly declared that I had never deserted from the truth in the matter, and, as I supposed, was admitted by himself. This letter is in the Huntington Library, San Marino, California. Andrew Jensen listed Fanny Alger as one of the first of Joseph's wives and stated that after his death she married again in Indiana and became the mother of a large family. Historical Record, Volumes 5-8, pages 233-942. C.G. Webb, Joseph's grammar teacher in Kirtland, told W. Weil in the 1880s that Joseph's dissolute life began already in the first times of the church in Kirtland. He was sealed there secretly to Fanny Alger. Emma was furious and drove the girl, who was unable to conceal the consequences of her celestial relation with the prophet, out of her house. Mormon Portraits, page 57. Fanny Brewer, who had gone to Kirtland in the spring of 1837, signed an affidavit in Boston on the 13th of September, 1842, that said in part, "There was much excitement against the prophet on another account. An unlawful intercourse between himself and a young orphan girl residing in his family and under his protection." John C. Bennett, History of the Saints, pages 85-6.2. Lucinda Pendleton Morgan Harris, wife of George W. Harris. Lucinda Harris, described by John C. Bennett in his History of the Saints as a very pretty and intelligent woman, was born on the 27th of September, 1801 in Virginia, a daughter of Joseph. Her first husband was the famous anti-Masonic martyr William Morgan. Her second marriage to George Washington Harris had been noted in the Arkansas Gazette of the 12th of January, 1831, which mistakenly described her new husband as a Mason. Andrew Jensen listed her as one of the first of the prophet's wives, and it seems likely that Joseph married her in 1838 when she was 37, for he was living at that time at the Harris home in Far West. History of the Church, Volume 3, page 9. This circumstance would seem to corroborate the story of Mrs. Sarah Pratt, who said in an interview with W. Weil, "Mrs. Harris was a married lady, a very great friend of mine. When Joseph had made his dastardly attempt on me, in 1842, I went to Mrs. Harris to unbosom my grief to her. To my utter astonishment, she said, laughing heartily, 'How foolish you are! Why, I am his mistress since 4 years.'" Mormon Portraits, page 60. When the Harris family moved to Nauvoo, they were given a lot directly across from the prophet and next door to that of Sarah Cleveland, another of History of the Church, Volume 3, page 362. B.W. Richmond, a stranger and guest in the mansion house at the time of Joseph's death, noted, "A lady standing at the head of Joseph Smith's body, her face covered and her whole frame convulsed with weeping. She was the widow of William Morgan, of Masonic memory. She is a short person, with light hair and very bright blue eyes, and a pleasant countenance." From an account based on Richmond's manuscript, which appeared in the Chicago Times and was reprinted in the Deseret News the 27th of November, 1875, George Harris either knew at the time or learned later of the relationship between his wife and the prophet, for he stood as proxy in the Nauvoo Temple in January 1846 when Lucinda was sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity. 3. Prescindia Hunting Buell, wife of Norman Buell, later the wife of Heber. Evidence of children born to Joseph Smith by women other than Emma is extremely scant, except in the case of Prescindia Huntington Buell. Prescindia once stated to Mrs. Eddy V. Smith that she did not know whether Mr. Budd or the prophet was the father of her son. 15 Years Among the Mormons, being the narrative of Mrs. Mary Eddy V. Smith, New York, and ed. 1859, page 34. This statement I regarded with due reserve until I discovered a photograph of the son, Oliver Buell, which showed an unmistakable likeness to other sons of Joseph, born by Emma Smith, see page 301 and illustration. Prescindia Huntington, said to have been large, tall, grand, and majestic in figure, dignified in manner, was born on the 7th of September, 1810, and married Norman Buell at the age of 17. Before her baptism into the church on the 1st of June, 1836, she had borne Buell 2 sons, George and Silas. Silas died very young, and a daughter, born on the 24th of April, 1838 at Fishing River, Missouri, died in infancy. Although there is some confusion about the birth date of Oliver, it is not significant in determining his parentage. Mrs. Buell told Augusta Crocheron, editor of Representative Women of Deseret, that Oliver was born in the spring of 1839 in Far West, Missouri. Joseph had lived in Far West through 1838 until his arrest on the 31st of October. Norman Buell apostatized in the spring of 1839, and if Oliver was born at that time, it is at least conjectural that he left the church because he suspected the paternity of his son. The genealogical archives in Salt Lake City list Oliver's birth as having taken place on the 31st of January, 1840, in Clay County, New York, an error in place if not in date, since Clay County is in Missouri, not New York. Even if Oliver was born at this later date, however, Joseph might still have been the father, since he escaped from the Missouri sheriff near Far West on the 15th of April, 1839. See Hiram Smith's account, History of the Church, Volume 3, page 321. Prescindia was still in Missouri at this time. She had visited Joseph twice when he was in Liberty Jail. The second time, the 15th of March, 1839, she had been forbidden to see him, and the prophet at once had written her a warm letter recommending that Buell go to Illinois if he keep the faith, and making vague but meaningful allusions to coming revelations of great significance. Ibidam, Volume 3, pages 285-6. The Huntington family left Far West on the 18th of April, but Prescindia remained with Buell. "I felt alone on the earth," she later wrote of this period, "with no one to comfort me except in my little son George, for my husband had become a bitter apostate, and I could not speak in favor of the church in his presence." The Women of Mormondom, ed. by Edward W. Tullidge, New York, 1877, page 213. Since Joseph's journal entries make it clear that after his escape he was mingling with the last Mormon group to leave Far West, which included the Huntington family, it is quite possible that he spent some time with Prescindia. Prescindia remained in Missouri until the fall of 1840. By this time, Buell had become reconciled to the church, and the couple moved to Lima, Illinois. It was not until the 11th of December, 1841, that the actual plural marriage ceremony between Joseph and Mrs. Buell was performed. According to the Utah church historian, Andrew Jensen, who provides this date, the ceremony was performed by Prescindia's brother Dimmick. That the Huntington family looked upon young Oliver as the prophet's son is suggested by Oliver Huntington's diary entry of the 14th of November, 1884. "Then I stood proxy for the prophet Joseph Smith in having sealed or adopted to him a child of my sister Prescindia, had while living with Norman Buell." Volume 3, page 236. For other references to Prescindia and Norman Buell in this diary, see Volume 1, pages 39, 44, 44a, to pages 16, 25, 46. A transcript of this diary is in the Utah State Historical Society Library. The ambiguous wording of the phrase "I have italicized" is significant, especially since there is no similar entry for any other of her children. John C. Bennett knew of Mrs. Buell's marriage to Joseph, for he listed a Mrs. as one of the prophet's spiritual wives. Each asterisk stands for a letter. Prescindia left Buell in 1846 to become one of the numerous plural wives of Heber C. Kimball, see the Nauvoo Temple record. Prescindia was married to Joseph Smith for eternity and to Kimball for time, to whom she bore 2 children. Point 4. Nancy Marinda Johnson Hyde, wife of Orson Hyde. The stories linking Nancy Marinda Hyde's name to that of Joseph Smith disagree widely as to the date of the marriage or liaison. Born in Pomfret, Windsor County, Vermont, on the 28th of June, 1815, Nancy later moved to Ohio, where the prophet lived for a time at the home of her father, John Johnson, in Hiram in 1832. According to Clark Braden, Nancy's brother Eli led the mob against Joseph in Hiram because he had been too intimate with his sister Marinda, who afterwards married Orson Hyde. Brigham Young, in after years, twitted Hyde with this fact, and Hyde, on learning its truth, put away his wife, although they had several children. Public discussion of the issues between the reorganized church, page 202, The genealogical archives in Salt Lake City show that Hyde did in fact take Nancy on the 31st of July, 1857, and have her sealed for eternity to Joseph Smith. But this throws no light on when Nancy was actually married to Joseph Smith, if indeed a ceremony was performed at all during his lifetime. John D. Lee, bodyguard to Joseph in Nauvoo, wrote in his autobiography, "Report said that Hyde's wife, with his consent, was sealed to Joseph for an eternal state, but I do not assert the fact." Mormonism Unveiled, page 147. William Hall, a Mormon convert between 1840 and 1847, wrote that Hyde was anxious to re-enter the church after his apostasy in 1839. He returned and desired Joe Smith to reinstate him in his former office as one of the 12 apostles. The conditions imposed by Joe Smith some of us would consider a little tough. They were these: all the money he had so hardly earned had to be given up to Joe, and also his wife, as a ransom for his transgression to obtain his former standing. Many jokes were cracked at his expense, and he was despised throughout the camp for his fickle-mindedness. The Abominations of Mormonism Exposed, page 113. Hall's account, if true, would indicate that Nancy Miranda Hyde became Joseph Smith's plural wife in April 1839 when Hyde was reinstated as an apostle. She was then 24. It may be, however, that she was not taught polygamy until December 1841, when Hyde was on a mission to Palestine, and she was favored with a personal revelation ordering her to move into the rooms above the printing shop and to hearken to the counsel of my servant Joseph in all things. History of the Church, Volume 4, page 467. Ebenezer Robinson, who lived above the printing shop, was forced to leave his quarters. That evening, he later wrote, Willard Richards nailed down the windows and fired off his revolver in the street after dark, and commenced living with Mrs. Nancy Miranda Hyde in rooms we had vacated in the printing office building where they lived through the winter. His family was residing at the time in Massachusetts, and Elder Orson Hyde was absent on his mission to Palestine. The Return, Volume 2, October 1890, page 346. The fact that Robinson's account links Nancy's name with Richard's is confusing, but that she was involved in polygamy as early as 1842 is undeniable. Between 1835 and 1858, Nancy bore 10 children. 2 sons were born in Nauvoo, who might possibly have had the prophet for a father. Orson Washington, born the 9th of November, 1843, and Frank Henry, born the 23rd of January, 1845. 5. Clarissa Reed Hancock, wife of Levi W. Hancock. There is a tradition among some of the descendants of Levi Hancock that Mrs. Hancock was sealed to Joseph Smith in Nauvoo, and that one of her sons may have been his child. Since there seems to be no printed or manuscript evidence to support this story, however, it must be taken with considerable reserve. It is of some interest, however, to note that one of Levi Hancock's sons, born on the 9th of June, 1845 in Nauvoo, was named Levison, as though to distinguish his parentage from that of a preceding son, born on the 19th of April, 1841, and named John Reed Hancock. Genealogical Archives, Salt Lake City. The latter might have been the child in question. Mrs. Hancock was born on the 18th of December, 1814 in New Hampshire, Point 6. Louisa Beeman, later the wife of Brigham Young, one of the best proofs that John C. Bennett had accurate information about Joseph's earliest wives is his statement that Miss L. Ashby B. Ashby was married to the prophet by Elder Joseph Bates Noble, History of the Saints, page 256. This is clearly Louisa Beeman, popularly believed to be Joseph's first plural wife, who was married to him on the 5th of April, 1841. Noble himself later swore to an affidavit stating that he performed the ceremony on this date. For text, see Joseph F. Smith, Jr., Blood Atonement and the Origin of Plural Marriage, page 75. Erastus Snow also wrote, My wife's sister, Louisa Beeman, was his first plural wife, she being sealed to him by my brother-in-law, Joseph B. Noble, the 5th of April, 1841, Historical Record, Volume 6, page 232. Louisa was born on the 7th of February, 1815, in Livonia, New York, and was 26 on her marriage day. She became Brigham Young's plural wife on the 14th of January, 1846. The Nauvoo Temple record for this date states that she was married to Young for time and to Joseph Smith for eternity, and bore him 2 sets of twins. All 4 children died in infancy. She died on May 16, 1850 in Salt Lake City. Point 7. Zena Diantha Huntington Jacobs, wife of Henry B. Jacobs, later the wife of Brigham Young. Zena Huntington has perhaps the most complicated record of all Joseph Smith's wives. She was born in Watertown, New York, the 31st of January, 1821, and was married to Henry Bailey Jacobs on the 7th of March, 1841. Record of marriages, Hancock County, Book A, page 47, and 1/2 months later, on the 27th of October, 1841, she was married to Joseph Smith, with her brother Dimmick officiating, and her sister Fanny acting as a witness. Historical Record, Volume 6, page 233. She was then 20. Since her first child, Zebulon Jacobs, was born on the 2nd of January, 1842, according to the Latter-day Saints Biographical Encyclopedia, she was therefore about 7 months pregnant with Jacobs's child at the time of her marriage to the prophet. This was an awkward fact for Zena to face after her public admission in 1878 that she had been a plural wife of Joseph Smith. See her quoted statement in Latter-day Saints Biographical Encyclopedia, Volume 1, page 698. When interviewed by members of the reorganized church, she refused to tell the month or year of her marriage to Joseph. She admitted that Dimmick had officiated at the ceremony, and stated that Brigham Young repeated it on his return from England. Interview of John W. Wright with Zena D. H. Young, the 1st of October, 1898. Saints Herald, Volume LII, pages 28 to 30. An odd assertion, in view of the fact that Brigham Young had actually returned from England in June 1841, several months before the ceremony in October. That there was a good deal of gossip about Zena Jacobs in Nauvoo is evidenced by the statements of John D. Lee and William Hall. The former wrote, "I then took a tour down through Illinois, winter of 1842. H.B. Jacobs accompanied me as a fellow companion on the way. Jacobs was bragging about his wife, what a true, virtuous, lovely woman she was. He almost worshipped her. Little did he think that in his absence she was sealed to the prophet Joseph." Mormonism Unveiled, page 132. Hall wrote as follows, "A Mr. Henry Jacobs had his wife seduced by Joe Smith in his time during a mission to England. She was a very beautiful woman, but when Jacobs returned, he found her pregnant by Smith. Jacobs put up with the insult, and still lived with her." The Abominations of Mormonism Exposed, pages 43 to 4. There is no record other than this bald statement that Zina ever bore Joseph a child. If true, it must have died in infancy, for Zina's other 2 children were born long after Joseph's death. Henry Cheriton Jacobs, son of Henry Jacobs, was born on the 22nd of March, 1846. Later, Zena bore Brigham Young a daughter. Zena left Jacobs in 1846 to marry Brigham Young. William Hall asserted that he had heard Young say publicly to Jacobs, "The woman you claim for a wife does not belong to you. She is the spiritual wife of brother Joseph, sealed to him. I am his proxy, and she, in this behalf, with her children, are my property. You can go where you please and get another, but be sure to get one of your own kindred spirits." Abominations of Mormonism Exposed, pages 43 to 4. This is confirmed by T.B.H. Stenhouse in his Rocky Mountain Saints, pages 185-6. Jacobs apparently accepted Young's decision as the word of the Lord, for he stood as witness in the Nauvoo Temple in January 1846, when Zena was sealed to Brigham Young for time and to Joseph Smith for eternity. Number 8. Mary Elizabeth Rollins Lightner, wife of Adam Lightner. Mary E. Rollins, born on the 9th of April, 1818, a daughter of John Rollins, was 13 years old when she first saw Joseph Smith in Kirtland. "When I entered the room," she wrote in her autobiography, "he looked at me so earnestly I felt afraid and thought, he can read my every thought, and I thought how blue his eyes were. After a moment he came and put his hands on my head and gave me a great blessing. Mary went to Independence in 1831 and remained in Missouri, marrying a non-Mormon Adam Lightner, the 11th of August, 1835. They moved to Nauvoo in 1840 or 1841 and purchased a lot just below the prophet's home. Here she taught painting to Joseph's adopted daughter, Julia. She was then the mother of 3 children. Curiously, she makes no mention of her marriage to Joseph in her autobiography, although such references may have been edited out. But on the 8th of February, 1902, when 84 years old, she swore to an affidavit that said in part, "I was sealed to Joseph Smith the prophet by commandment." In the spring of 1831, the Savior appeared and commanded him to seal me up to everlasting life, gave me to Joseph to be with him in his kingdom, even as he is in the Father's kingdom. In 1834, he was commanded to take me for a wife. I was 1,000 miles from him. He got afraid. The angel came to him 3 times, the last time with a drawn sword, and threatened his life. I did not believe. If God told him so, why did he not come and tell me? The angel told him I should have a witness. An angel came to me, it went through me like lightning. I was afraid. Joseph said he came with more revelation and knowledge than Joseph ever dare reveal. Joseph said I was his before I came here, and he said all the devils in hell should never get me from him. I was sealed to him in the Masonic Hall over the old brick store by Brigham Young in February 1842, and then again in the Nauvoo Temple by Heber C. Kimball. The original of this statement is owned by Mrs. Nell Osborne of Salt Lake City. Extracts from Mrs. Lightner's autobiography appeared in the Utah Genealogical and Historical Magazine, Volume 17, 1926, page 193. I have, fortunately, obtained a complete copy. The Nauvoo Temple record shows not only that Mary was sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity in 1846, but also that she was sealed to Brigham Young for time. Her autobiography makes clear, however, that she remained with Lightner. Adam Lightner refused to be baptized, although he was friendly to the church. Sometime after the 4th of July, 1842, the Lightners moved to Pontoosac. The prophet felt very sad when he knew we were going to leave, Mary wrote, and with tears running down his cheeks, he prophesied that if we left the church, we would have plenty of sorrow. It is possible that Mary's 4th son, born in 1843, was Joseph's child, and that Adam Lightner's desire to move from Nauvoo came from suspicion or actual knowledge of the relationship between Joseph and his wife. He never joined the church and did not take his wife to Utah until 1863, but Mary remained a faithful Mormon. She bore 10 children and died on the 17th of December, 1913, at the age of 95. 9. Patty Bartlett Sessions, wife of David Sessions. Patty Sessions, famous midwife in Nauvoo in Utah, was born on the 4th of February, 1795, and was married to David Sessions on the 28th of June, 1812. According to her private journal, she was sealed to Joseph Smith on the 9th of March, 1842, when 47 years old. I was sealed to Joseph Smith by Willard Richards the 9th of March, 1842, in Newell K. Whitney's chamber, Nauvoo, for time and all eternity. Sylvia, my daughter, was present when I was sealed to Joseph Smith. I was after Mr. Sessions' death, about 1850, sealed to John Perry for time on the 27th of March, 1852, Great Salt Lake City. Joseph Smith's diary entry for the 9th of March, 1842, confirms at least the fact that he spent part of the day with Willard Richards, whom Patty names as performing the ceremony and who was temple recorder at the time. Quote, in the afternoon continued the translation of the Book of Abraham, called at Bishop Knight's and Mr. Davis's with a recorder, and continued translating and revising and reading letters in the evening, Sister Emma being present in the office. Close quote. History of the Church, Volume 4, page 548. Close quote. It is significant that John C. Bennett knew about Joseph's marriage to Mrs. Sessions. He lists Mrs. Estrip as one of the prophet's spiritual wives. In his History of the Saints, Mrs. Sessions lived to be almost 99, dying on the 14th of December, 1893. 10. Delsina Johnson Sherman, widow of Lyman R. Sherman Delsina Johnson, sister of Almira and Benjamin Johnson, was born on the 19th of November 1806 in Westford, Vermont. Apparently, she was married to Joseph Smith before June 1842. The unpublished letter of Benjamin Johnson to George S. Gibbs says in part, "In visiting June 1842, my sister, the widow of Lyman R. Sherman, who died a martyr to conditions of Far West, I found her with a former acquaintance, Sister Louisa Beeman, and I saw from appearances that they were both in the prophet's care, and that he provided for their comfort. The marriage of my eldest sister to the prophet was before my return to Nauvoo, and I asked no questions." 10. Sarah Pratt told W. Weil in 1885 the following story. There was an old woman called Durfee. She knew a good deal about the prophet's amorous adventures, and, to keep her quiet, he admitted her to the secret blessings of celestial bliss. I don't think that she was ever sealed to him, although it may have been the case after Joseph's death, when the temple was finished. At all events, she boasted here in Salt Lake of having been one of Joseph's wives. Mormon Portrays, page 54. Since John C. Bennett listed a Mrs. Dead as one of Joseph's wives, it is highly probable that she was sealed to the prophet before June 1842, when Bennett was expelled. Joseph H. Jackson listed both Mrs. Durfee and Mrs. Sessions as mothers in Israel, whose duty it was to initiate younger women into the mysteries of plural marriage. Narrative of the Adventures and Experiences of Joseph H. Jackson, Warsaw, Illinois, 1844, page 14.12. Sally Ann Fuller Gawley, wife of Samuel Gawley. Sally Ann Fuller was born at Saratoga, New York on the 24th of October, 1815. The date of her marriage to Samuel Gawley is not known, but the Nauvoo Temple record states that on the 29th of January, 1846, she was sealed to Joseph Smith, Jr. Since John C. Bennett listed a Mrs. God as one of Joseph's wives, it is possible that he was referring to Mrs. Gawley. If so, it would seem that her marriage to Joseph Smith took place before Bennett's expulsion in 1842.13. Mrs. A. married to Joseph by Brigham Young. 0.14. These women, listed by John C. Bennett in his History of the Saints, remain as yet unidentified. 0.15. Eliza Roxy Snow. Of all Joseph's wives, none testified to the fact of her marriage more frequently and with greater pride than the poetess Eliza R. Snow. Born on the 21st of January, 1804, daughter of the well-to-do Campbellite Oliver Snow, she joined the Mormons in 1835. In the spring of 1836, she taught a girls' school in Kirtland and lived at Joseph's home. Later, in Nauvoo, she again moved into his home, and on the 29th of June, 1842, at 38, she became his wife. Her detailed autobiography remained unpublished in the Bancroft Library until 1944, when it appeared serially in the Relief Society magazine in Salt Lake City. Of her marriage, she wrote, "In Nauvoo, I first understood that the practice of plurality was to be introduced into the church. The subject was very repugnant to my feelings. So directly was it in opposition to my educated feelings that it seemed as though all the prejudices of my ancestors for generations past congregated around me. But when I reflected that I was living in the dispensation of the fullness of times, embracing all other dispensations, surely plural marriage must necessarily be included, and I consoled myself with the idea that it was far in the distance and beyond the period of my mortal existence. It was not long, however, after I received the first intimation, before the announcement reached me that the set time had come. I was sealed to the prophet Joseph Smith for time and eternity in accordance with the celestial law of marriage which God has revealed, the ceremony being performed by a servant of the Most High." See also her statement in the biography of her brother. Eliza R. Snow Smith, Biography and Family Record of Lorenzo Snow, page 68. Brigham Young had performed the ceremony, and the fact of the marriage is neatly borne out by Joseph's diary entry for the date of the marriage, the 29th of June, 1842. Heard the recorder read in the law of the Lord, the mysterious book that was said to have listed all the plural wives in Nauvoo, paid taxes, rode out in the city on business with Brigham Young, end quote. History of the Church, Volume 5, page 49. There is a persistent tradition that Eliza conceived a child by Joseph in Nauvoo, and that Emma one day discovered her husband embracing Eliza in the hall outside their bedrooms, and in a rage flung her downstairs and drove her out into the street. The fall is said to have resulted in a miscarriage. This tradition was stated to me as fact by Eliza's nephew, Leroy C. Snow, in the church historian's office, Salt Lake City. Solon Foster, co-twin for the prophet, was present in the mansion house when the incident occurred. Years later he met Emma's sons, who were then publicly denouncing polygamy in Utah, and reproached them for their attitude. Joseph, the night your mother turned Eliza R. Snow into the street in her nightclothes, you and all the family stood crying. I led you back into the house and took you to bed with me. You said, I wish Mother wouldn't be so cruel to Aunt Eliza. You called her aunt because you knew she was your father's wife. He did not deny it. Foster recounted this in a sermon in southern Utah that was heard by John R. Young. Young described it in a letter to Mrs. Vesta P. Crawford, who kindly consented to let me quote it here. C. G. Webb further corroborated the story in an interview with W. Will. Eliza Snow used to be much at the prophet's house, and Sister Emma treated her as a confidential friend. Very much interested in Joseph's errands, Emma used to send Eliza after him as a spy. Joseph found it out, and, to win over the gifted young poetess, he made her one of his celestial brides. There is scarcely a Mormon unacquainted with the fact that Sister Emma, on the other side, soon found out the little compromise arranged between Joseph and Eliza. Feeling outraged as a wife and betrayed as a friend, Emma is currently reported as having had recourse to a vulgar broomstick as an instrument of revenge. And the harsh treatment received at Emma's hand is said to have destroyed Eliza's hopes of becoming the mother of a prophet's son. After Joseph's death, Eliza, in 1846, was sealed to Brigham Young in the Nauvoo Temple. She bore him no children. In later years, she became one of the leading women in the West, and died on the 5th of December. 16. Sarah Ann Whitney, later the wife of Heber C. Kimball. Sarah Whitney, daughter of Newell K. Whitney, was born on the 22nd of March, 1825, and was married to Joseph at 17. Her own sworn statement, giving the date as the 27th of July, 1842, was published along with a confirming affidavit sworn by her mother in Joseph F. Smith, Jr. Blood Atonement, and The Origin of Plural Marriage. It is said that she was the first woman given in plural marriage by and with the consent of both parents. Apparently it took a special revelation, however, to win their consent. The revelation commanding and consecrating this union is in existence, wrote Orson F. Whitney, though it has never been published, it bears the date, the 27th of July, 1842, and was given through the prophet to the writer's grandfather, Newell K. Whitney. Latter-day Saints Biographical Encyclopedia, Volume 1, page 226, William Clayton and Joseph C. Kingsbury both knew of the marriage of Sarah Whitney to Joseph, and swore to this fact in separate affidavits. Historical Record, Volume 6, pages 225 to 6. Sarah in 1846 was sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity, and to Heber C. Kimball for time, in the Nauvoo Temple. She bore Kimball several children. 17. Sarah Marietta Kinsley Cleveland, wife of John Cleveland. Sarah Cleveland befriended Joseph and Emma Smith after the expulsion of the Mormons from Far West. Emma lived at the Cleveland home in Quincy, Illinois, while Joseph was in Liberty Jail. After Nauvoo was settled, Joseph wrote to the Clevelands, "We have selected a lot for you, just across the street from our own, beside Mrs. Harris." History of the Church, Volume 3, page 362. Since Mrs. Cleveland was first counselor in the Relief Society, it seems probable that her marriage to Joseph took place shortly after the expulsion of Bennett in 1842, when Joseph married most of the leaders in that society. She was then 54 years old. According to the genealogical archives in Salt Lake City, she was born on the 20th of October, 1788, in Massachusetts, daughter of Andrew Jensen listed her as one of the prophet's wives, but gave no details. Sarah Pratt told W. Weil that Sarah Cleveland kept a kind of assignation house for the prophet and Eliza R. Snow. Mormon Portraits, page 90. When the Clevelands left Nauvoo in May 1843, Mrs. Cleveland wrote a farewell letter to the Times and Seasons on May 1, thanking her friends and explaining that her husband had not succeeded in business as had been anticipated. The Nauvoo Temple record states that Sarah M. Kinsley was sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity and to John Smith for time in January 1846, but whether this means that Sarah left Cleveland and remained with John Smith, I have been unable to discover. 18. Elvira A. Cowles, later the wife of Jonathan H. Holmes. Andrew Jensen listed Elvira Cowles as one of Joseph's wives, saying that she was afterwards the wife of Jonathan H. Holmes. Now, it happened that her marriage to Holmes, one of Joseph's bodyguard, took place in Nauvoo on the 1st of December 1842, with the Wasp, the 20th of December 1842. If Jensen is correct, then Elvira must have been married to the prophet at an earlier date. Since she was treasurer of the Nauvoo Relief Society, it seems likely that this marriage occurred shortly after the Bennett expulsion in June 1842. Hers seems to be the only case where the prophet married a woman for time and eternity and then relinquished her for time to another man. Austin Cowles, Elvira's father and member of the High Council, bitterly opposed polygamy and joined the apostates who followed William Law out of the church in May I 844. He may have been embittered by Joseph's involvement with his daughter. Elvira was born in Massachusetts on the 23rd of November 1813 and was probably 29 at the time of her marriage to the prophet. Holmes apparently knew of her relationship with Joseph and willingly stood as proxy in January 1846 when Elvira's marriage to the prophet for eternity was solemnized in the newly completed Nauvoo Temple. 19. Martha McBride, later the wife of Heber C. Kimball. Martha McBride was born in Chester, New York, the 17th of March, 1805. In 1869, she swore to an affidavit saying that she had been married to Joseph Smith in the summer of 1842. For text of the affidavit, see Joseph Smith, Jr., Blood Atonement and the Origin of Plural Marriage, page 72. See also O. Whitney, Life of Heber C. Kimball, page 432. She was then 38. The Nauvoo Temple record states that in January 1846 she was married to Joseph Smith for eternity, and to Heber Kimball for time. She bore Kimball no children. .20. Ruth D. Vose Sayers, wife of Edward Sayers. Ruth Vose, daughter of Mark and Sally Vose, was born on the 26th of February 1808 in Boston. Andrew Jensen listed her as a wife of Joseph Smith, but stated erroneously that she was married to Sayers after the death of the prophet. Historical Record, Volumes V, 4th 8, page 1004. According to the Genealogical Archives in Salt Lake City, she married Edward Sayers in St. Louis on the 23rd of January, 1841. When Joseph went into hiding on August Leo, 1842, he lived for several weeks at the home of Edward Sayers outside Nauvoo. History of the Church, Volume 5, page 19. And it seems probable that he married Mrs. Sayers at this time. She was then 34. She died on the 18th of August, 1884, in Salt Lake City. .21 Desdemona Wadsworth, Fulmer, later the wife of Ezra T. Benson, Desdemona W. Fulmer, daughter of Peter and Susanna Fulmer, was born in Pennsylvania on the 6th of October, 1809. She was married to Joseph Smith sometime during 1842, when 33 years old. She was known as a quiet, unassuming, faithful woman. William Clayton, secretary to Joseph Smith, on the 16th of February 1874, swore to an affidavit asserting that in February 1843, Joseph gave me to understand that Eliza R. Snow, Louisa Beeman, Desdemona W. Fulmer, and others were his lawful wives in the sight of heaven. Historical Record, Volume 6, pages 225-234. Desdemona was officially sealed to the prophet in the Nauvoo Temple in January 1846. In the same ceremony, she married Ezra T. Benson for time. She went to Utah in 1848 and died in Salt Lake City on the 9th of February, 1880. 22. Emily Dow Partridge, later the wife of Brigham Young. 23. Eliza M. Partridge, later the wife of Amasa Lyman. Emily and Eliza Partridge, daughters of the prosperous Mormon Bishop Edward Partridge, lived in the home of Joseph Smith in Nauvoo after their father's death. In 1843, when they were married to the prophet, Emily was 19 and Eliza 23, the former having been born on the 28th of February 1824 and the latter on the 20th of April 1820 in Painesville, Ohio. Emily wrote the story of their marriages in 1887. The prophet Joseph and his wife Emma offered us a home in their family, and they treated us with great kindness. We had been there about a year when the principle of plural marriage was made known to us, and I was married to Joseph Smith on the 4th of March, 1843, Elder Heber C. Kimball performing the ceremony. My sister Eliza was also married to Joseph a few days later. This was done without the knowledge of Emma Smith. 2 months afterward, she consented to give her husband 2 wives, provided he would give her the privilege of choosing them. She accordingly chose my sister Eliza and myself, and to save family trouble, Brother Joseph thought it best to have another ceremony performed. Accordingly, on the 6th of May, 1843, we were sealed to Joseph Smith a second time, in Emma's presence, she giving her free and full consent thereto. From that very hour, however, Emma was our bitter enemy. We remained in the family several months after this, but things went from bad to worse until we were obliged to leave the house and find another home. Emma desired us to leave the city, but after considering the matter over, we decided to remain with our friends. Ibidem, Volume 6, page 240. In this connection, Joseph's journal entry for May 11, 1843 is a curiosity. Thursday, 11. At 6 a.m., baptized Louisa Beeman, Sarah Alley, and others. 8 a.m. went to see the new carriage made by Thomas Moore, which was ready for traveling. Emma went to Quincy in the new carriage. I rode out as far as the Prairie. History of the Church, Volume 5, page 383. 6. Perhaps the carriage was intended as balm for Emma's outraged pride. That Emma gave her consent was further sworn to by Lavina Smith Walker, daughter of Hiram Smith, who stated in 1869, "I, Lavina Walker, hereby certify that while I was living with Aunt Emma Smith in Fulton City, Fulton County, Illinois, in the year 1846, she told me that she, Emma Smith, was present and witnessed the marrying or sealing of Eliza Partridge, Emily Partridge, Maria, and Sarah Lawrence to her husband, Joseph Smith, and that she gave her consent thereto." Historical Record, Volume 6, page 223. Eliza married Amasa Lyman after Joseph's death and bore him 5 children. Emily married Brigham Young in September 1844 at the age of 20 and bore him 7 children. She was Young's 9th wife. In January 1846, in the Nauvoo Temple, the sisters were officially sealed to the prophet for eternity and to Lyman and Young for time. 24. Almera Woodward Johnson, later the wife of Reuben Barton. Few of Joseph's wives have had the fact of their marriage so thoroughly documented as Almera Johnson. Daughter of Ezekiel Johnson, she was born in Vermont on the 12th of October, 1812, and was 31 at the time of her marriage. Her own sworn statement says in part, "On a certain occasion in the spring of the year 1843, the exact date of which I do not now recollect, I went from Macedonia to Nauvoo to visit another of my sisters, at which time I was sealed to the prophet Joseph Smith. After this time I lived with the prophet Joseph as his wife, and he visited me at the home of my brother Benjamin F. at Macedonia." Joseph F. Smith, Jr., Blood Atonement and the Origin of Plural Marriage, pages 70-1. Almera's brother Benjamin described the courtship of his sister in his letter to George S. Gibbs. It was Sunday morning, the 3rd of April, or 1843, that the prophet proceeded to open to me the subject of plural marriage and eternal marriage, and he said that years ago in Kirtland the Lord revealed to him the ancient order of plural marriage, and the necessity for its practice, and did command that he take another wife, and that among his first thoughts was to come to my mother for some of her daughters, and as he was again required of the Lord to take more wives, he came now to ask me for my sister Almira. His words astonished me, and almost took my breath. I sat for a time amazed, and finally, almost ready to burst with emotion, I looked him straight in the face and said, "Brother Joseph, this is something I did not expect, and I do not understand it. You know whether it is right. I do not. I want to do just as you tell me, and I will try to, but if I ever should know that you do this to dishonor and debauch my sister, I will kill you, as sure as the Lord lives." And while his eyes did not move from mine, he said with a smile, in a soft tone, "But, Benjamin, you will never know that, but you will know the principle in time, and will rejoice in what it will bring you." The prophet, with Louisa Beeman and my sister Delsina, had it agreeably arranged with Sister Almira, and after a little instruction she stood by the prophet's side and was sealed to him as a wife by Brother William Clayton, after which the prophet asked me to take my sister to occupy room number 10 in his mansion home during her stay in the city. But as I could not long be absent from my home and business, we soon returned to Ramus, where, on the 15th day of May, some 3 weeks later, the prophet again came, and at my house occupied the same room and bed with my sister, that the month previous he had occupied with the daughter of the late Bishop Partridge as his wife. And at that time he sealed me to my first wife for eternity, and gave me my first plural wife, Mary Ann Hale, an orphan girl raised by my mother then living with us, who is still with me. Benjamin also signed an affidavit on the 4th of March, 1870, giving the same facts, but more briefly and formally. See Historical Record, Volume 6, page 221. The fact of Joseph's visit to Almira is neatly corroborated by his own journal entry of May 16, 1843, "Started for Ramus, went to Benjamin F. Johnson's with William Clayton to sleep. Before retiring, I gave Brother and Sister Johnson some instructions on the priesthood. Except a man and his wife enter into an everlasting covenant and be married for eternity, while in this probation, by the power and authority of the holy priesthood, they will cease to increase when they die. That is, they will not have any children after the resurrection." History of the Church, Volume 5, pages 391-2. After Joseph's death, Almira married Reuben Barton and bore him 5 daughters, all of whom died young. Barton apostatized, and Almira joined her brother in Utah in 1861. She lived to be 84. See her obituary, Deseret News, the 26th of March, 1896. 25. Lucy Walker, later the wife of Heber C. Kimball. None of Joseph's wives described her courtship with such ingenuous detail as Lucy Walker. She was born in Vermont on the 30th of April, 1826, daughter of John and Lydia Walker. After the death of her mother, she came in January 1842 to live at the prophet's home. In the year 1842, she wrote later, President Joseph Smith sought an interview with me and said, "I have a message for you. I have been commanded of God to take another wife, and you are the woman." My astonishment knew no bounds. This announcement was indeed a thunderbolt to me. He asked me if I believed him to be the prophet of God. "Most assuredly I do," I replied. He fully explained to me the principle of plural or celestial marriage, said this principle was again to be restored for the benefit of the human family, that it would prove an everlasting blessing to my Father's house and form a chain that could never be broken, worlds without end. "What have you to say?" he asked. "Nothing. How could I speak, or what could I say?" He said, "If you pray sincerely for light and understanding in relation thereto, you shall receive a testimony of the correctness of this principle." I thought I prayed sincerely, but was so unwilling to consider the matter favorably that I fear I did not ask in faith for light. I was tempted and tortured beyond endurance until life was not desirable. The prophet discerned my sorrow. He saw how unhappy I was and sought an opportunity of again speaking to me on that subject, and said, "Although I cannot under existing circumstances acknowledge you as my wife, the time is near when we will go beyond the Rocky Mountains, and then you will be acknowledged and honored as my wife." He also said, "This principle will yet be believed and practiced by the righteous. I have no flattering words to offer. It is a command of God to you. I will give you until tomorrow to decide this matter. If you reject this message, the gate will be closed forever against you." This aroused every drop of Scotch in my veins. For a few moments I stood fearless before him and looked him in the eye. I felt at this moment that I was called to place myself upon the altar, a living sacrifice, perhaps to brook the world in disgrace and incur the displeasure and contempt of my youthful companions. I had been speechless, but at last found utterance and said, "Although you are a prophet of God, you could not induce me to take a step of so great importance, unless I knew that God approved my course. I would rather die." He walked across the room, returned, and stood before me with the most beautiful expression of countenance, and said, "God Almighty bless you. You shall have a manifestation of the will of God concerning you, a testimony that you can never deny. I will tell you what it shall be. It shall be that joy and peace that you never knew." Oh, how earnestly I prayed for these words to be fulfilled. It was near dawn, after another sleepless night, when my room was lighted up by a heavenly influence. To me it was, in comparison, like the brilliant sun bursting through the darkest cloud. My soul was filled with a calm, sweet peace that I never knew. Supreme happiness took possession of me, and I received a powerful and irresistible testimony of the truth of plural marriage, which has been like an anchor to the soul through all the trials of life. I felt that I must go out into the morning air and give vent to the joy and gratitude that filled my soul. As I descended the stairs, President Smith opened the door below, took me by the hand, and said, "Thank God, you have the testimony. I too have prayed." He led me to the chair, placed his hands upon my head, and blessed me with every blessing my heart could possibly desire. The first day of May, 1843. I consented to become the prophet's wife, and was sealed to him for time and all eternity, at his own house by Elder William Clayton, Lyman O. Littlefield, Reminiscences of the Latter-day Saints, Logan, Utah, 1888. Lucy had just turned 17. Emma was absent on a shopping trip to St. Louis, and was due to return on May 2, which may have explained Joseph's haste to have Lucy married to him by May 1. History of the Church, Volume 5, page 379. Lucy admitted before a court in 1892 that Emma knew nothing of her marriage. Temple Lot Case, pages 371-5, an entry in William Clayton's private journal dated May 1, 1843, confirmed Lucy's story. At the Temple, at the 10th of March, ride Joseph to Lucy Walker. Quoted in Joseph F. Smith, Jr., Blood Atonement and the Origin of Plural Marriage, page 55. In 1845, Lucy married Heber C. Kimball. She bore him 9 children. She always talked freely about her marriage to Joseph, and once swore to an affidavit that told substantially the same story as the one detailed above. Here she said also that Emma gave her consent to the marriage of at least 4 other girls to her husband, and she was well aware that he associated with them as wives within all the meaning of all that word implies. This is proved by the fact that she herself, on several occasions, kept guard at the door to prevent disinterested persons from intruding when these ladies were in the house. Historical Record, Volume 6, page 230. See also the Nauvoo Temple Record, January 1846. In the Nauvoo Temple, Lucy was sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity and to Kimball for time. 26. Helen Mar Kimball, later the wife of Horace K. Whitney. Helen Kimball was born on the 22nd of August, 1828, in Mendon, New York. Her father, Heber Kimball, gave her to Joseph Smith for a wife when she was 15 years old. William Clayton swore in 1874 that Joseph took Helen Kimball for a wife in the spring of 1843. Historical Record, Volume 6, page 225. Although in later years she wrote vigorously in defense of polygamy, she never mentioned her marriage to Joseph, and a revealing "I had, in hours of temptation," she wrote, "when seeing the trials of my mother, felt to rebel. I hated polygamy in my heart." Representative Women of Deseret, page 112. Yet, when she married Horace K. Whitney in the Nauvoo Temple in February 1846, she allowed herself to be sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity. She bore Whitney 11 children, .27, Maria Lawrence, later the wife of Brigham Young, 28, Sarah Lawrence, later the wife of Heber C. Kimball. Maria and Sarah Lawrence, daughters of Edward Lawrence, were born in Canada. Maria on the 18th of December, 1823, and Sarah on May 13th, 1826. Canadian-born William Law told W. Weil in 1887, "Soon after my arrival in Nauvoo, the two LL girls came to the Holy City, two very young girls, 15 to 17 years of age. They had been converted in Canada, were orphans, worth about $8,000 in English gold. Joseph got to be appointed their guardian. Emma complained about Joseph's living with the L girls, but not very violently. She used to complain to me about Joseph's escapades whenever she met me on the street." This interview appeared in the Salt Lake Tribune and was reprinted in Thomas Gregg, The Prophet of Paimra, page 508. The tradition was strong among Joseph's wives that the Lawrence sisters had been married with Emma's consent. Emily Partridge, who, like Maria Lawrence, lived at the prophet's home and also married Brigham Young, once wrote, "Emma, about this time, spring of 1843, gave her husband 2 other wives, Maria and Sarah Lawrence." Woman's Exponent, Volume 14, page 38. See also the court testimony of Lucy Walker, Temple Lot Case, page 371, and the affidavit of Lavina Walker, Historical Record, Volume 6, page 223. According to the Nauvoo Temple record, Maria in January 1846 was officially sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity and to Almond W. Babbitt for time. Apparently the marriage to Babbitt was dissolved almost at once, for in the same month she became the wife of Brigham Young. She bore him no children and died in Nauvoo. Sarah Lawrence's marriage to Joseph Smith for eternity was solemnized in the Nauvoo Temple in January 1846. In the same ceremony she was married to Heber C. Kimball for time. She divorced Kimball in Salt Lake City on the 18th of June, 1851, married again, and went to California. Historical Record, Volumes V, Verse 8, page 976, and Journal History, Mississippi, the 18th of June, 1851. Flora Ann Woodworth. Flora Woodworth, daughter of Lucian Woodworth, architect of the Nauvoo House, was born on the 17th of November, 1826, in New York State. According to William Clayton, Joseph's secretary, she was married to the prophet in the spring of 1843. Historical Record, Volume 6, page 225. She was then 16. Joseph once referred to her in his journal. May 14, 1844, prayed for Elder Woodworth's daughter, who was sick. History of the Church, Volume 6, page 377. Andrew Jensen stated that after the death of the prophet she married again, but this union proved unhappy. She died in the wilderness on the journey westward at the time of the exodus from Nauvoo. Historical Record, Volumes VV8, page 1009. According to Julia Murdoch Farnsworth, niece of the Julia Murdoch adopted by Joseph Smith, the prophet had a plural wife named Flora Gove. Mrs. Farnsworth, before her death, gave this information to Mrs. Vesta P. Crawford of Salt Lake City, and it is possible that this was the married name of Flora Woodworth, since she is not mentioned elsewhere. Thought 30. Rhoda Richards, later the wife of Brigham Young. Rhoda Richards, eldest sister of Willard Richards, was born on the 8th of August, 1784. "In my young days," she wrote, "I buried my first and only love, and true to that affiance, I have passed companionless through life, but am sure of having my proper place and standing in the resurrection, having been sealed to the prophet Joseph, according to the celestial law, by his own request, under the inspiration of divine revelation." The Women of Mormonism, pages 421-2. She also signed an affidavit affirming that she was married to Joseph in Nauvoo by her brother Willard on the 12th of June, 1843. See Joseph F. Smith, Jr. B. Elude Atonement and the Origin of Plural Marriage, page 75. She was then 59. The ceremony was clearly a favor by Joseph to her brother, who was doubtless concerned over his sister's fate in the celestial kingdom. In the Nauvoo Temple, in January 1846, she was sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity, and to Brigham Young for time. She lived to be 95.31. Hannah Els. Hannah Els, daughter of Thomas and Hannah Els, was born in Newcastle, Northumberland, England, on the 4th of March, 1813. According to Andrew Jensen, she was a lady of culture and refinement, somewhat tall in stature. Jensen printed an affidavit by John Benbow that said in part, "Be it remembered that this 28th day of August, 1869, personally appeared before me, James Jack, a notary public, John Benbow, and upon his oath said that in the summer of 1843, at his home 4 miles from Nauvoo, President Joseph Smith taught him and his wife Jane Benbow the doctrine of celestial marriage, or plurality of wives. And further, that Hannah L. Smith, a wife of the prophet, boarded at his home 2 months during the summer of the same year. And further, that President Smith frequently visited his wife Hannah at his house. Historical Record, volumes VV8, pages 222-230. Hannah Els died in Nauvoo in 1844.32. Melissa Lott, later the wife of Ira Jones Wills. Melissa Lott, daughter of Cornelius P. Lott, foreman of Joseph's farm, was born on the 9th of January, 1824, and was 19 when married to the prophet. Joseph's son wrote that she was a tall, fine-looking woman with a dark complexion, dark hair, and eyes, a good singer, quite celebrated in a local way. Memoirs of President Joseph Smith, Saints Herald, the 18th of December, 1934, page 1614. Melissa swore to an affidavit stating that she was married to Joseph Smith on the 20th of September, 1843, by Hiram Smith in the presence of her parents. This marriage and the date were recorded in the family Bible, which is now in the church historian's office in Salt Lake City. Joseph F. Smith, Jr. Blood Atonement and the Origin of Plural Marriage, pages 72-55. Joseph Smith's diary entry for the 20th of September 1843 clearly indicates that he spent the day with the Lotts. Wednesday, 20th. Visited my farm, accompanied by my brother Hiram. History of the Church, Volume 6, page 35. When testifying in the Temple Lot case, Melissa said, "I was married to Joseph Smith, the 27th of September, 1843. As nearly as I can remember or understand it, the marriage ceremony was as follows. You both mutually agreed to be each other's companion, husband, and wife, observing the legal rights belonging to this condition, that is, keeping yourselves holy for each other and from all others during your lives. I married him under that ceremony, knowing at the time he had a wife living, his wife, Emma Smith." When asked by the prosecution, "Did he agree in that marriage ceremony to keep himself from his wife Emma for you?" she replied, "I cannot tell you. You will have to ask him that question. I don't think he made any promise of that kind. There were no children born as a fruit of that marriage. I married Mr. Willis in the year 1849. There have been children as the fruit of that marriage." Temple Lot case, page 314. Melissa never referred to the fact that in February 1846, when she was officially sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity in the Nauvoo Temple, she was also sealed to John M. Bernhazel for time. Fanny Young Murray, wife of Roswell Murray. Fanny Young, sister of Brigham Young, was born on the 8th of November, 1787. She married Robert Carr in 1803. After his death, she married Roswell Murray in 1832. The story of her sealing to the prophet was told by Brigham Young. I recollect a sister conversing with Joseph Smith on this subject. "Now, don't talk to me. When I get into the celestial kingdom, if I ever do get there, I shall request the privilege of being a ministering angel. That is the labor that I wish to perform. I don't want any companion in that world. And if the Lord will make me a ministering angel, it is all I want. Joseph said, "Sister, you talk very foolishly. You do not know what you will want." He then said to me, "Here, Brother Brigham, you seal this lady to me. I sealed her to him. This was my own sister, according to the flesh." Journal of Discourses, Volume 16, pages 1667. Andrew Jensen stated that the ceremony occurred on the 2nd of November, 1843. Fanny was then 56. She died on the 11th of June, 1859. 34. Olive Gray Frost, later the wife of Brigham Young. Olive Gray Frost, daughter of Aaron Jensen, who includes her in his list of Joseph's wives, does not mention the date of her marriage, but it was probably after the 12th of April, 1843, since she was a missionary to England with her sister and brother-in-law, Parley P. Pratt, between the fall of 1840 and that date. She was then 27. Although happy and genial in disposition, she suffered from ill health and died in Nauvoo on October 1845. She had become the 11th wife of Brigham Young in February 1845. See the biography written by her sister Mary Ann Pratt, Historical Record, Volume 6, page 235. Mrs. Mary Eddy V. Smith stated that when the dead bodies of Joseph and Hiram arrived in Nauvoo from Carthage, Olive Frost went entirely mad. 15 Years Among the Mormons, page 36.35. Mary Ann Frost, wife of Parley P. Pratt. The Nauvoo Temple record states that in February 1846, Mary Ann Frost was sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity, her husband, Pratt, standing as proxy. This is the only reference I have found linking Mrs. Parley Pratt's name to that of the prophet, but since nearly all of the wives sealed to Joseph Smith in the Nauvoo Temple had clearly been married to him during his lifetime, it may be assumed that Mrs. Pratt had also been. Mary Ann Frost was born on the 11th of January, 1809, at Groton, Vermont, and was married to Pratt on May 9, 1837. Since she was in England with Pratt from the fall of 1840 to April 1843, it is unlikely that she became a plural wife of Joseph Smith before the latter date. Her son Moroni, born on the 7th of December 1844, may be added to the list of boys who might possibly have been sons of Joseph Smith. The remaining names are listed alphabetically rather than chronologically. 36. Olive Andrews, later the wife of Brigham Young. Olive Andrews was born on the 24th of September 1818 in Livermore, Maine. According to the Nauvoo Temple record, she was married to Joseph Smith for eternity and to Brigham Young for time in January 1846. 37. Mrs. Edward Blossom. Richard Rushton, former steward in the Mansion House, told W. Weil the following story. The going, purchasing, and return occupied about a week. At night, after the departure of the elect lady, the steward gave the keys to the prophet, and in the morning he as usual stepped lightly and rapped at the door of the bedroom. A voice, strange to his ear, yet of feminine softness, rather startled him in response with the words, "Come in." He entered timidly, when lo and behold, there lay in Emma's bed and stead the beautiful and attractive young wife of Elder Edward Blossom, a high counselor of Zion, afterwards exalted to the apostleship by Brigham Young. With a pair of laughing, glistening eyes, and with a smile of happy sweetness, she spoke in soft and pleading accents. "I suppose, Brother Rushton, I shall have to be Sister Emma to you this morning," as she gracefully handed the keys to him. Astonished and blushing, the faithful steward left the room to resume his duties, leaving the adulterous prophet and his charmer to themselves. The same thing was repeated each morning during the week Emma was away purchasing supplies for the prophet's hotel. Mormon Portraits, pages 65-6. It should be noted, however, that contrary to Weil's statement, no one by the name of Blossom was ever made an apostle. I have thus far been unable to find any other reference to either Edward Blossom or his wife. 38. Elizabeth Davis, later the wife of Cornelius P. Lott. Elizabeth Davis was born on the 11th of March, 1791, in Suffolk, England. According to the Nauvoo Temple record, she was married to Joseph Smith for eternity and to Cornelius P. Lott for time in January 1846-39. Mary Huston, later the wife of Heber C. Kimball. Mary Huston was born on the 11th of September 1818 in Jackson, Ohio. According to the Nauvoo Temple record, in January 1846 she was married to Joseph Smith for eternity and to Heber C. Kimball for time. She was later listed by Orson F. Whitney as one of the wives of Joseph Smith who married Kimball. She bore no children. Life of Heber C. Kimball. L. pages 430-2.40a. Vienna, Jacques. Vienna Jacques was born near Boston in 1788. She came to Kirtland in 1833, and Joseph Smith, in a revelation on the 8th of March, directed her to consecrate her property to the church and receive an inheritance in Missouri. Doctrine and Covenants, section 90. According to the genealogical archives in Salt Lake City, Vienna was sealed to Joseph Smith on the 28th of March, 1858. Descendants of her neighbors in Salt Lake City hold, however, that the marriage took place while the prophet was alive. Miss Jacks, who apparently never married anyone else, lived to be over 90.41. Cordelia Callista Morley, later the wife of Frederick W. Cox. Cordelia Morley, a daughter of Isaac and Hannah Morley, was born on the 28th of November, 1823, in Kirtland, Ohio. According to the Nauvoo Temple record, in January 1846, she was married to Joseph Smith for eternity and to Frederick W. Cox for time. She was Cox's second wife and bore him 7 children. Point 42. Sarah Scott, later the wife of Heber C. Kimball. Sarah Scott was listed by O.F. Whitney as a wife of Joseph Smith, who later married Heber C. Kimball. She had no children. Life of Heber C. Kimball, page 430-2.43, Sylvia Sessions, later the wife of Heber C. Kimball, and Sylvia Sessions, daughter of David and Patty Sessions, was born on the 31st of July, 1818, and was probably about 25 or 6. Since the diary of her mother makes no mention of this marriage, it is possible that Patty was unaware of it. Andrew Jensen listed Sylvia as one of the prophet's wives, and Orson F. Whitney listed her as one of Joseph's wives, who later married Heber C. Kimball. See Historical Record, Volume 6, page 234, and Life of Heber C. Kimball, page 432. Her marriage to Kimball is noted in the Nauvoo Temple record for January 1846. There, she was sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity and to Kimball for time. Sylvia was married also to Ezekiel Clark, by whom she had one daughter, Martha Sylvia. See Frank Essam. Pioneers and Prominent Men of Utah, page 1153, and Salt Lake Telegram, the 3rd of March, 1952, the obituary of her daughter. And there is some evidence that she married a Windsor P. Lyon. She died the 13th of April, 1882, 44. Nancy Maria Smith, later the wife of Heber C. Kimball. Orson F. Whitney listed Nancy Maria Smith as one of the wives of Joseph Smith, who later married Heber C. Kimball. He listed also Nancy Maria Winchester as a former wife of the prophet who married Kimball. It is possible that they were one and the same person, but Whitney was in a position to know the truth, and would not have been likely to have made such an error. Life of Heber C. Kimball, pages 430-2.45. Jane Tibbetts, later the wife of Elam Luddington. Jane Tibbetts was born on the 27th of August, 1804, at Gorham, Maine. According to the Nauvoo Temple record, on the 17th of January, 1846, she was sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity and to E. Luddington for time. 46. Phoebe Watrous, later the wife of Lucian Woodworth. Phoebe Watrous was born on the 1st of October, 1805, in Sharon, New York. According to the Nauvoo Temple record on the 19th of January, 1846, she was sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity and to Lucian Woodworth for time. 47. Nancy Maria Winchester, later the wife of Heber C. Kimball, Nancy Maria Winchester, according to the genealogical archives in Salt Lake City, was born on the 10th of August, 1828, in Erie County, New York, a daughter of Stephen and Nancy Case Winchester. But Andrew Jensen, in listing her among the prophet's wives, states that her father was Benjamin Winchester. The date of her marriage to Joseph Smith has not been published, but if it took place in 1843 or 1844, she could not have been more than 15 or 16. O.F.W. Whitney listed her among Kimball's wives. See Historical Record, Volume 6, page 234, and Life of Heber C. Kimball, pages 430-2. And the Nauvoo Temple record states that this latter marriage took place in January 1846, when she was sealed to Kimball for time and to Joseph Smith for eternity. 48. Sophia Woodman, later the wife of Gad Yale. Sophia Woodman was born on the 25th of August, 1795 in Sanborn, New Hampshire. According to the Nauvoo Temple record, on the 27th of January, 1846, she was sealed to Joseph Smith for eternity and to Gad Yale for time. Since the first printing of this book, students of Mormon polygamy have continued to uncover information about Joseph Smith's wives. Mrs. Mary B. Powell was shown a significant unpublished letter in the L.D.S. Church Historian's office in Salt Lake City, written by Joseph Smith when in hiding in 1842. This was a request in his own handwriting to Newell K. Whitney to bring his daughter Sarah Ann to the cornfield to spend the night with him. A copy of Mrs. Powell's manuscript is in the Huntington Library. Stanley Ivins informed me that his researches indicated that Joseph Smith was sealed to 66 or 67 living women, and that after his death, 149 dead women were sealed to him in temple ceremonies. Bibliography. There is a stupendous literature on Mormonism, almost all of which is valueless as source material for the study of Joseph Smith. On the other hand, county histories, antiquarian monographs, and old newspaper files are very significant, although they deal only obliquely, if at all, with the Mormon phenomenon. A useful bibliography is therefore difficult to compile, and I have severely restricted this list to the true source books to which one must go for first-hand accounts of Joseph Smith's activities, omitting all secondary histories and biographies except those few which must be taken into account by any objective student of Mormon history. Joseph Smith's own writings, particularly the 7-volume History of the Church elaborated chiefly from his own journals, are by all odds the most important. The court records, few of which have hitherto been used in studies of Joseph Smith, are also basic. The great wealth of manuscript material now in the Utah State Historical Society was made available by the WPF Federal Writers Project and Historical Records Survey, which made a significant contribution to Western history by copying scores of pioneer diaries and memoirs that had been buried in trunks and attics over the state. Other manuscripts, particularly the invaluable Oliver Huntington Diary, were made available through the tireless activity of the Brigham Young University. Additional manuscript material was generously furnished me by friends in Utah. My research among newspapers was greatly shortened by the painstaking scholarship of Cecil Snyder, who collected and made copies of a great many newspaper articles on Mormonism appearing in Missouri and Illinois between 1830 and 1847. Copies of the Snyder collection are now at the New York Public Library, Harvard University, Brigham Young University, and the Utah State Historical Society. I examined, in addition, the files of the Palmyra newspapers between 1820 and 1830, most of which are in the New York State Library at Albany. The files of the Painesville Republican, 1837-8, and Painesville Telegraph, 1831-8, now in the Western Reserve Historical Society Library, and the files of the New York Herald, 1840-4. The legion of secondary sourcebooks that furnished background for the life and times of Joseph Smith are not listed here, although many are mentioned in the footnotes. A history of Mormonism can, of course, be written without recourse to anti-Mormon accounts, but it would perforce be incomplete, for many of these provide flesh and blood for the skeletal narratives in the official history. All such documents have been used with care, but they have not been ignored. The Writings of Joseph Smith, The Book of Mormon, Palmyra, New York, Egbert B. Grandin, 1830, rare. A Book of Commandments for the Government of the Church of Christ, organized according to law on the 6th of April, 1830. Zion, Independence, Missouri, W. W. Phelps and Company, 1833, very rare, reprinted by the Salt Lake Tribune. In 1/884, Doctrine and Covenants of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, carefully selected from the Revelations of God and compiled by Joseph Smith, Jr. Oliver Cowdery, Sidney Rigdon, Frederick G. Williams, Kirtland, 1835, The 1921 edition, printed in Salt Lake City, is quoted throughout the book. It differs somewhat from the collection used by the Reorganized Church, General Joseph Smith's Appeal to the Green Mountain Boys, December 1843, Nauvoo, Illinois, 1843. Correspondence between Joseph Smith, the prophet, and Colonel John Wentworth, General James Arlington Bennett, and the Honorable John C. Calhoun, in which is given a sketch of the life of Joseph Smith, the rise and progress of the Church of Latter-day Saints, New York, published by John E. Page and L. R. Foster, 1844. The Voice of Truth, containing Joseph Smith's correspondence with General James Arlington Bennett, Appeal to the Green Mountain Boys, correspondence with John C. Calhoun, Esquire, views of the powers and policy of the government of the United States, Pacific Innuendo, and Governor. Ford's Letters, a friendly hint to Missouri, and a few words of consolation for the globe. Also, correspondence with the Honorable Henry Clay. Nauvoo, Illinois, printed by John Taylor, 1844. Most of these items were also published as separate pamphlets in 1844. The Pearl of Great Price being a choice selection from the Revelations, translations, and narrations of Joseph Smith. Liverpool, published by F.D. Richards, 1851, History of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Period I. History of Joseph Smith, the Prophet, by himself, 6 vols. Introduction and Notes by B. H. Roberts. Salt Lake City, Deseret News, 1902-12. The Holy Scriptures translated and corrected by the Spirit of Revelation. Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Plano, Illinois, 1867. I. Court Records I. Record of the trial of Joseph Smith for disorderly conduct, Bainbridge, New York, the 20th of March, 1826. Published in the New Schaff-Herzog Encyclopedia of Religious Knowledge, New York, 1883, Volume 2, page 1576.2. Unpublished records of the lawsuits brought against Joseph Smith and others to collect debts incurred in Kirtland, Ohio. These are in the Chardon, Ohio Courthouse. See the volumes for 1837-8.3, Record of the Trial of Joseph Smith for Assault and Battery against Calvin W. Stoddard, Court of Common Pleas, County of Geauga, Ohio, the 16th of June, 1835. The Library of the Reorganized Church has a copy of this record. Point 4. Testimony given in November 1838, before the judge of the 5th Judicial Circuit of the State of Missouri, on the trial of Joseph Smith, Jr. and others for high treason and other crimes against that state, published in Correspondence, Orders, etc., in relation to the disturbances with the Mormons, Fayette, Missouri, 1841. Published separately as Senate Document Number 189, 26th Congress, 2nd Session, 1841.5, Proceedings before Judge Thomas C. Birch in the House of Elisha B.C. Reekmore, Daviess County, Missouri, the 8th of April, 1839. A copy of this record is in the Library of the Reorganized Church. Point 6. Decision in the case of Joseph Smith before Judge Pope at Springfield, January 1843. See Federal Cases, Volume 22, page 773.7, United States Circuit Court, 8th Circuit. The Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Complainant versus the Church of Christ at Independence, Missouri. Complainant's Abstract of Pleading and Evidence. Lamoni, Iowa, 1893. This is referred to throughout the book as the Temple Lot Case. Manuscripts. Sidney Rigdon, Early Mormon. M.A. Thesis, University of Chicago, 1931. Cowdery, Oliver. Letters to Warren A. Cowdery, now in the Huntington Library, San Marino, California. Gunn, Stanley R. Oliver Cowdery, Second Elder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, M. S. Thesis, Brigham Young University, 1942, Huntington, Oliver Boardman, Journal, 3 vols. Jepson James, Memories and Experiences. Johnson, Benjamin F., Letter to Elder George S. Gibbs, 1903. Journal History, LDS, Church Historian's Office, Salt Lake City, This incorporates the printed history of the church by Joseph Smith, to which are appended unpublished letters, journals, memoirs, minutes of meetings, discourses, and editorial notations. Wisconsin LLIMD, Expedition of the Emmett Company, * Leitner, Massachusetts, Rye, Elizabeth Rollins, Autobiography. Nauvoo Temple Record, 1846, Pan Coast EVAL, The Mormons at Kirtland. Ma Thesis, Western Reserve University, Cleveland, 1929. Peck, Reed, Mormons So Called. This manuscript, dated Quincy, Adams County, Illinois, the 18th of September, 1839, is in my... It was purchased from Peck's granddaughters, Mabel Peck Meyer and Hazel Peck Cass, in 1942. It had been published in L.B. Cake, Old Mormon Manuscript Found. Peepstone Joe Exposed, New York, 1899. 4a. Journal 1835 to 1874. Record of the first quorum of elders belonging to the Church of Christ in Kirtland, Geauga County, Ohio. This is in the library of the Reorganized Church of Jesus Church of Latter-day Saints. Parallel between Ethan Smith's View of the Hebrews and the Book of Mormon. Shurtleff, Lumen Andros, Journal. Smith, John Lyman, Manuscript. Stevenson, Edward, Life and History of Elder Edward Stevenson, 1891. Stout, Alabama, Len J., Journal. Stout Hosa, Journal. Witherjohn, History of the Church, the Reorganized Church, which owns this manuscript, published all except the last and most revealing portion, part of Chapter 19th, Chapters 20th and 22, in its Journal of History, Volume 1, 1908. Asterisk indicates a typewritten transcript in the Utah State Historical